Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for the 2022 Great Lakes Summer Fellows final presentations. We also are happy to welcome one of our NOAA La Penta interns to our presentations today. We've been interacting with our two NOAA La Penta interns all summer, and it's been really nice to have them join us. So we're happy to have Marissa join our group of 8 Sigler Summer Fellows today. So first, to just start off really quickly, again, I want to thank you all for attending. Our summer fellows have been working really hard for 12 weeks all summer on some really exciting research projects. Time has gone very, very fast, and it's kind of hard for all of us to believe that we're to this point, but at the same time, we're very excited to hear about all of their accomplishments and the amazing work they were able to get done in such a short period. I would also like to thank all of the mentors that joined us for the summer from both Sigler and NOAA and some of our consortium partner universities to help mentor the students and work with them this summer. Your time and expertise are extremely valuable, and we can't thank you enough for the coaching and mentoring that you've done. So we're going to keep on time today. A couple of housekeeping notes. Please keep your microphones muted. During the presentations, the fellows will be talking for 15 minutes, and we will have 5 minutes at the end of their presentations for questions. I will monitor the question and answers, and just depending on the size of the audience and the number of questions, we're going to kind of play it by ear in terms of if I ask you to enter questions in the chat box or raise your hands. We'll just kind of feel our way through that. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our first presenter. We've got Marion Martyres speaking first on her project that she did with Sarah Waters and Ellen Brody from NOAA. Welcome, Marion, and you're up.
Thank you, Mary. As Mary mentioned, I'm Marion Martyres, and I worked on Project 1, which was the Great Lakes Bay Watershed Education and Training Program. So before I begin, I would like to take a moment to thank the people who helped and supported me with my project from the Great Lakes BWET program, National Marine Sanctuaries, and Sigler. And this is an overview of the project that I will be going into in my presentation. It'll start with background information, go into research question, research methods, then findings, discussion and conclusions, and end with future research. So beginning with the background information. The Bay Watershed Education and Training Program is a NOAA grant program focused regionally to support environmental and watershed education for K-12 students and related professional development for teachers. It encourages capacity building and environmental education partnerships between the grantees and their community. And there are multiple regional programs and funding opportunities available nationally, with offices located in 7 different areas across the United States. In California, Chesapeake, Great Lakes, Gulf of Mexico, Hawaii, New England, and the Pacific Northwest. And the primary delivery of BWET is through competitive grants that promote meaningful watershed educational experiences, also known as MWEs. And the MWE is a learner-centered framework that focuses on investigations into local environmental issues and leads to informed action. Learning objectives should address academic standards, but might also include other objectives such as teamwork, socio-emotional learning, and civic responsibility. So within the MWE framework are elements that are essential to its success. The essential elements included in a MWE are issue definition, outdoor field experiences, synthesis and conclusion, and environmental action. These elements, together with the supporting practices, create a learner-centered framework that emphasizes the role of the student in actively constructing meaning from their learning experiences. So during issue definition, students learn about an environmental issue by planning and conducting background research and investigations that they are actively involved in creating. Students participate in multiple outdoor field experiences to explore their driving question and are actively involved with the planning of the field trips to explore the driving question. They can either take place outside on the school grounds or at a different location, as long as it is a way to learn about their local environment in a non-traditional classroom. During synthesis and conclusions, students reflect on each experience and investigation in relation to their peers or school community. And this could involve multiple disciplines and a variety of formats, including discussion, journaling, presentations, or creating art. And finally, as a result of their investigations, students should identify solutions and develop environmental action projects that directly address the issue within their school, neighborhood, or community. And students are actively engaged in, and to the extent possible, drive the decision-making, planning, and implementation of the action project. And a main point I want to emphasize is that MIWIs and projects are all place-based learning to provide an emphasis on what students can learn about their local environment and community. The MIWI framework is also not a linear process and will occur in different stages based on what the project is. So now, looking closer at the Great Lakes Be Wet program, we see that the funding amount for the most recent grants was $1,150,706, granted to 15 grantees across the Great Lakes watershed. On average, about 60% of applicants receive funding, which is determined by the federal funding amount provided to the program and how much money is requested from the grantees. And the Great Lakes Be Wet regional grants are funded through the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which supports experience-based learning opportunities for youth to promote Great Lakes stewardship. NOAA contributes to Focus Area 5 of the Global Action Plan through science observations and models, along with youth education programs. And this is a map with 15 grantees, and as you can see, it is not just primarily in Michigan. This program encompasses schools using environmental education across the states that connect to the Great Lakes, and therefore provides more opportunities for a variety of schools that apply. And so with that, my research question was, what are the most effective uses of the MIWI framework to achieve K-12 stewardship action projects, as demonstrated in the Great Lakes region Be Wet funded projects? So in order to do that, I incorporated multiple research methods. And first, I examined literature reviews, attended teacher trainings, created social media content, and analyzed grantee projects. My initial research began with the literature review of case studies from previous case studies and grantees. The case studies were used by evaluators to measure and analyze the projects, and I used the case studies to form an initial understanding and basis of MIWIs from successful projects for my own research project. And I was also able to attend 2 summer institutes across the Great Lakes region. This is a photo of the Discovering Place Summer Institute put together by one of the 6 place-based education hubs of the Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative. This training focused on teachers in the Flint area, with 4 days spent exploring different environmental activities that could be applied to their classrooms, touring potential partners for their projects, and finally beginning to create their project that would be applied to their school with the support of the program coordinators and mentor teachers. The Northeast Michigan Great Lakes Stewardship Initiative, also known as NEMI-GLISI, held a summer institute in Alpena, Michigan. And this training focused on Lake Huron stewardship and allowed for teachers to learn about the issue of marine debris through meetings with community partners, a beach cleanup, and various examples of previous participant projects. These trainings helped me to see current academic standards and hear from current educators about how they could implement environmental education into their lessons. I also worked on social media to use for public outreach and engagement with community members. The Great Lakes Be Wet program has a Facebook page where posts are shared about updates, funding opportunities, and to highlight the work of their grantees. For my contribution, I created posts featuring the most recent grantee projects. This objective allowed me to overview case studies of successful MIWIs. And through this, I learned how to modify language to be more accessible to the general public. And with the help of people like Aubrey Lashaway and Brie Farina, I also learned how to create engagement on social media and what key components are necessary for social media posts. And this pilot tool was recently created for grantees to support their own planning and revision of new and existing MIWIs to meet the full definition. A majority of my research project was spent analyzing the grantee projects using the MIWI audit tool to see if the Great Lakes Be Wet program team can use this for their own evaluations. So looking closer at one of the elements being evaluated, the audit tool provides an overall definition of what the essential element is looking for, and in the white boxes goes over the specific criteria that is required for a successful MIWI. The tool has the evaluator go through each element and mark in the red, yellow, or green boxes whether there needs to be modification to the project. Each of those boxes also includes the exact description of what the evaluator of their MIWI should look for and whether or not it meets those standards. The 3 boxes at the bottom allow space for the evaluator to write in specifics and reflect on their project's success. My analysis used the fiscal year 2019 grants for my evaluation, and in order to have quantitative data for this research project, I assigned my own numeric values. So using these findings, I will be able to go into the deeper findings that I found. And as I mentioned earlier, in order to compare and analyze the grantee projects, I converted the MIWI audit tool to have numerical values. From the spreadsheet, you can see I divided both the essential and supporting elements as categories for each grantee, which were labeled as numbers. Cells that contain a 3 and are green had all great jobs on the MIWI audit tool, while those with a 2 and a yellow had at least 1 need improvement in that section. Cells with a 1 and a red color had at least 1 MIWI component missing. The total scores column on the right is equal to each of the grantee scores of their projects based on my numeric system. The total in element row at the bottom of the table indicates the score that was added up from the MIWI elements of all the projects. And finding the sum of those numbers for each grantee allowed me to compile that data into this graph where I compared the fiscal year 2019 grantee projects. A score that had 3s for every criteria based on the numerical system I put together was a 24. And this graph analyzed the total scores of the elements based on their success. As mentioned earlier, the essential elements were issue definition, outdoor field experiences, synthesis and conclusion, and environmental action projects. MIWI supporting elements are teacher facilitation, learning integration, sustained experiences, and local context. With this comparison of the MIWI elements, if all 3s were found in that element, that score was added up to be a 39. And finally, I collected the data from the graph and used the 3 lowest FY19 grantee scores in correlation with the 3 lowest MIWI element scores, which were found in issue definition, outdoor field experiences, and learning integration. As the table indicates, learning integration had a consistent 2 across these 3 grantees, while scores in the other elements varied. So now on to discussion and conclusions of my results. And to answer the research question of most effective uses, my research indicates that there was the most success seen in the MIWI elements of synthesis and conclusion, teacher facilitation, sustained experience, and local context. These elements were reported to be easy to achieve and were very clear to both educators and students about how they were to be conducted. The elements that need improvement are issue definition, outdoor field experiences, environmental action projects, and learning integration. And as we saw in the graphs, learning integration was the lowest score across the grantee projects. Criteria for the evaluation of this element included whether objectives were clearly defined, if they clearly support the established curriculum, and whether the MIWI connects learning across multiple disciplines. There could have been several factors that affected this element, but the main one I was coming across in my evaluation was that there was a strong focus in incorporating MIWIs only into the science curriculum. Because of the misconception of place-based learning being a science focus, many people do not use an interdisciplinary approach to this type of learning. The Great Lakes BWET program could address this problem by providing multiple discipline representatives from community partners to come speak to the grantees and provide support on executing their projects. The graphs also indicated that there was a fairly consistent success in meeting the MIWI supporting elements criteria, but more variance with the essential elements, as the graph indicated more of the essential elements had lower scores than the supporting elements. Factors that could have potentially caused these results could be linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, lack of resources allotted to the project, and a lack of motivation either with teachers or students. So expanding on the COVID-19 factor, this seemed to be the biggest obstacle of all the BWET grantees, including those who achieved complete success with their projects. In their reports, many grantees cited issues of school closures, lack of funding, lack of motivation, and lack of online resources as barriers to the success of their projects. These issues created a hindrance to some schools, forcing them to put pauses on their projects and apply for an extension on funding for the next school year in order to complete their MIWIs. So now after that, I'll go into future research. And the question of how important partners are to the success of MIWIs came up during my research. Using the FY19 grantees again, I created a spreadsheet with all the grantees' partners and labeled them based on the type of resource they provided. These resources included hosting, providing lab resources, being an educator resource, and being a student resource. A majority of these partners were educator resources and supported and provided tools for the teachers. This could be an indicator as to why teacher facilitation was so successful in the evaluations. I also created a graph that looked at how many partners were there per grantee, and as you can see, there's a very significant variance between grantees. Looking into whether the number of partners was positively or negatively correlated to the total scores of the grantees would be an interesting project to conduct in the future. Also, since the MIWI audit tool was a pilot tool, it is successful in allowing the evaluator to use clear criteria to analyze the projects, but it was hard to compare data for analysis. A recommendation would be to establish a numerical evaluation system to compare between grantees, but I believe that this tool should be used with other funding years to evaluate its true effectiveness. So with that, I want to thank you all for listening to my presentation, and a big thank you to Sigler and the Great Lakes BWET program for allowing me to work on this project. Any questions?
I'm muted. Thanks so much, Marion. Wonderful presentation. So I do have one question here that was in the chat box, so I'll read that to you. It's from Deepika. I'm sorry, my screen is so small. The way I have my setup here, so I'll get that in a second. So it says, thank you to Marion for an excellent presentation. Very promising work on education and sustainability. Great to hear about developing community partnerships and visibility with social media. Can you speak to the sustainability of these ongoing efforts? In other words, are community partners also involved in social media forums, like adding pictures, etc., to continue to highlight their work and outdoor field experiences for students? Long term, are commercial entities in the community showing any interest in sustaining these education efforts through partnerships and collaboration?
That's a great question, and to answer that, during my research, both in person at the trainings and also online using the social media posts, I was able to gauge that a lot of partners, whether it's like a school or a community partner or someone who's just interested in environmental education, there's a lot of promise and commitment to this type of partnership and education that people are working towards. So I think that it's able to be sustained long term because those partners are very interested in this topic, and because it is such a new field that many people want to, invest now and kind of further the cause and help it along. So yeah.
Great, thank you. And that question, I'm sorry, Dee, that was from Dee Burkhart from NIH. I apologize, Dee. I wasn't able to see the asker name very clearly on my screen. So a couple of other questions and some comments. So Greg Dick says, really impressive work and presentation, Marion. Thank you. Martha Moody asks, are non-school helpers who are nature people, such as birders, fishermen, and hikers, involved in these efforts?
Mm-hmm. Yes, they're all very involved. There's multiple partners such as like the DNR or just environmental groups that are in the community. They like to come out and help with water quality testing or help with different programs that can be applicable to students. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And we have one more question from Anna Bagold. She said, sorry if I missed it, but what would be an example of a place-based education in a non-STEM field that would be acceptable to the grantees you evaluated?
So I think one example that I was coming across in my work too was using like reading and writing to kind of illustrate environmental education. So having students do more of a holistic approach, and they would be able to kind of be in nature and reflect on what they're learning and write like maybe poems or a short story or think creatively about how they're impacting their environment, things like that.
Okay, and one more question I think we have time for this is a great way to end it. So Nora Kalaf says, great presentation, and asked, what of your research this summer felt the most rewarding?
I think the in-person teacher trainings were probably the most rewarding because due to like COVID and all, it was hard to get engaged with people, and actually being in person and getting to talk to these teachers and educators and even the partners, they were all fantastic and allowed me to kind of learn more about the field in a way that I would never have been able to without this opportunity. So I think just being able to be in that community of people was really great.
Great, Marion. Thank you so much. Wonderful presentation, and it's just been wonderful getting to know you this summer. Thank you.
Thank you.